Hey everyone, welcome back. Thank you for joining us for our third and final Scotch tasting for Fall Scotch Tastings 2020. It's been a bit of a different year this year, but I think we've all had a lot of fun just the same, and here's hoping we can be right back to normal for our usual in-house Scotch tastings next year. But let that, bit of sentimentality not take away from the fact that we still have 4 really cool whiskeys to taste tonight, and we are joined once again by the always wonderful Lee Hansen. Hello, Lee. Hey.
Hey, good to see you.
It's really nice to have you back. How's things in Calgary?
Got a little bit nippy today. Pretty cold. But otherwise, no, we're doing great. It's been it was a little bit nutso today. First, the last day for a lot of restaurants. More restaurants shutting down tomorrow. A couple of retail stores that will have to really lock down with only 15% capacity. So that means no greasy salesmen are allowed to come in.
Good.
So
if it's a rep-free Christmas, I'm going to call it a win.
The more these video things I can do, the better.
Yep. Awesome. So we've talked a little bit about first editions this year. We've talked a little bit about Old Malt Cask this year. But of course, both of those brands are changing market position a little bit, and they're moving a little more upscale, with Hepburn's Choice not coming back into the market, perhaps repositioning itself in the market to take on a slightly different role. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the history behind Hepburn's Choice while we pour ourselves our first whiskey, which that's a terrible one to show everyone because it's just a little bottle I filled on your back porch. But we're going to start with the Glenrothes 7-year, everyone. Let's start here and jump into learning about Hepburn's Choice from Mr. Lee Hansen.
So Hepburn's Choice is another expression from the Lang family. Of course, we had Andrew on in our last tasting, and the Old Malt Cask and first editions that Kyle already mentioned are bottled at 50% alcohol for the Old Malt Cask and cask strength for the first edition. There is another magic number out there besides 50%, which is almost wholly owned by Old Malt Cask. They're definitely known for that. But the other magic number in alcoholic percentage is 46. And 46 is the lowest alcohol you can have for a single malt where it won't show a tremendous amount of haze at room temperature. Now, if when Kyle and I were tasting these on my back deck, it was 10 degrees, and we still were able to see a little bit of haze, particularly in the first one we're going to have. It's just a super pale little Glenrothes. The name Hepburn is the name of Andrew's grandfather, who was a diplomat, and in traveling the world, loved to bring the malts of his homeland to share with people from around the world. And so their hope is that these whiskeys that they present and choose to bottle at the tasty alcoholic percentage of 46% would have been, in fact, his choice. So that's where the name comes from. The differentiation is 46% alcohol. And another differentiation we're going to see across the line is we're going to start to see the Old Malt Casks becoming a little bit older. If they're still better at 50%, we'll still see the occasional younger one. But Hepburn's Choice is going to become a home for younger whiskeys. And speaking of younger whiskeys, we're starting off with the Glenrothes 7-year-old.
Now, I'm really excited to have these.
Nobody jumps up and down about 7 years old, but you'll see in this lovely little number here that we have quite a bit of flavor profile, and that would be a decision to make it at this. This is a refill sherry butt, as I said, bottled at 46%. Now they got 921 bottles out of this. That's a pretty high number for the stuff that we're typically seeing from the Old Malt Cask we've had in the past, and certainly the first edition. That reasoning for that is when you bottle it younger, you have more whiskey in the barrel to work with. The Angel Share hasn't really taken hold yet. We've got very little evaporation. We're also bottling it down by adding spring water, so we're bottling it down to 46. So we're going to get a little bit more volume than we're actually used to.
Now, I'm really excited to taste Glenrothes here right next to the Inchgower just because of how they're distilled. I mean, Glenrothes is a very, very long fermentation at 58 hours. The distillation process is designed to maximize reflux. It's a very, very long distillation process for Glenrothes. Whereas Inchgower, it's, very steeply tilted line arms. It's a very hot distillate. It's very short distillation. They're really trying to maximize that kind of soft nuttiness, whereas I find Glenrothes, because of that longer distillation time, they're really trying to maximize some of those maybe more esoteric and different characteristics, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the difference between the two on that.
So a bit of history about Glenrothes. It started in 1878, and it was made for blended whiskey, and they have a bit of a turbulent history because of that overproof, that high alcohol. This distillery has burnt down 4 times and actually exploded once in 1903. Each time that there was these mishaps, they used it as an opportunity to actually expand the line. And then the ownership of it has been a little bit contentious as well. It's owned by the Erdington company. It also happens to own Highland Park and Macallan and Glenturret. Macallan, just sort of brush that off, no big deal.
Yeah.
But they
the less said, the better, really, about Macallan.
Yeah, the Berry brothers actually approached Erdington to make this for them. They've owned the brand since the 80s. Released it as a single malt. You've seen it in the it's like a little pineapple. It'd be perfect for a Molotov cocktail.
These guys.
And then eventually,
yeah,
there we go.
Yeah, this style.
And then eventually it was purchased back by Edrington in 2017. So it's like Bert and Liz. They've kind of gone back and forth with ownership of this whiskey.
Now, with Berry Brothers and Glenrothes for a very long time was actually the core of Cutty Sark, wasn't it?
That's right, a core of Cutty Sark and Famous Grouse, among others. But it was. It seems like Famous Grouse is not exactly the belle of the ball. They, I see it come up often where they've been a part of Famous Grouse, a number of different distilleries from a number of different owners. It's not a small distillery, kind of middle of the road, 5.5 million liters. But you see here, note, it's absolutely pale, like so pale. And that's, of course, from only having 7 years in the barrel. And we've got a large whiskey to wood ratio. We actually have more whiskey than wood to work with. So we're going to get some pretty delicate numbers here, but this is meant to be just a really soft, very approachable, a little bit of cocoa on the nose.
To me, it's actually coming off very salty and very Speyside, and I don't usually think that with Glenrothes. This almost comes off as, you mentioned Highland Park. This kind of comes off as like a slightly softer expression of a Highland Park, which I really quite like.
No real smoke to speak of, but I get the kind of the weight that you're speaking of, and a little bit of salt influence there, definitely. It's just so light and a perfect place to start. There is absolutely nothing offensive about this. It's missing any of that phenolic character. This is a really soft, approachable style, and very easy on the palate. I love the bootlegger thing that we've got going on with those vials.
I know, the little vials are just fantastic. Doesn't look like we filled these on your back deck at all.
Yeah, that's the penmanship of a serial killer right there. I actually had a chat with Ian Forthleith from Tom and Towel this morning. We were talking about chill filtration and caramel adding, and Tom and Towel does do a little bit. And a note that they had on the independent bottled side, we've always very vilified that addition of caramel.
Absolutely,
it's cheating. I've always also said it's fairly homogenizing too. They want to make it look the same. And something that he told me was that it actually, they use it to replace the color that gets leached out by chill filtration. And they're using very small amounts. He goes, guys like Dalmore, they're just pouring this stuff in. But it's not adding any sugar at all. It's actually quite bitter, and so it's got a burnt texture to it. So he's going to send me one of those vials with their caramel that they use.
Oh, I'd love to try that. That'd be fascinating.
Yeah, exactly. I'll bring it around as a prop. It'll be really cool. And it's just a really honest thing. You said, like people will get down on it. But it is about homogenization. It is about making sure that there's a dependable product.
And I think that's a really interesting point is, when this cask of Glenrothes, again, I'm using the little vial, when this cask of Glenrothes is done, there isn't going to be any more. There might be another Hepburn's Choice Glenrothes next year, or it might be 10, 12 years till we see another one. That's a very different customer that you and I are selling to than the person who just wants to always know exactly what this tastes like every time they get it and to keep coming back to that same safe place. It is a very different style.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've actually tried to, in my old age, as I've softened, I've tried to kind of back off on vilifying those guys, especially as things have come into my portfolio that maybe a little bit of chill filtration. So we open our eyes when we end up finding a product we really like. A neat thing, I'm glad you brought this up. A neat thing that's happening with the Glenrothes is they do a lot of sherry barrels at Glenrothes, but they do a lot of bourbon as well. So when we're drinking one of the independent bottles, particularly guys from the Lang family, whatever the Hepburn's Choice, Old Malt Cask, or First Edition, or even in the Old and Rares, the barrel might be different, and we're going to see that a little bit down the road in one of the other tastings. They bring their own barrels to the party, so it might not be something you regularly see with the distillery itself. This is so soft. What is the retail on this one?
We are doing the Glenrothes for $85, and I think we were doing these for $70 for the tasting event. So.
That 70 is a hell of a deal. You actually might be giving it away.
Well, you do what you can in a pandemic, right? I mean,
I sure appreciate the participation. This is a great way to get people aboard. How many people are at the tasting tonight?
I don't know how many total people we have, because some people bought whole sets, some people bought single bottles. But the Craigellachie here, we brought in 3 cases. We sold absolutely all of it. We sold all 18. The other 3, we brought in 2 cases of each, so 12. And I have some of each, so let's say we sold 8 or 9 of each of those. So we did just fine on this one, Lee.
That's amazing. Well, we're in a good position with this one. I know we came up short with Del Ewan last time around. All of this stuff just landed. So if there is opportunities for people to come jumping in and grabbing some more, that I do have them more.
We are going to be needing more of the Craigellachie. Definitely going to need more of the Craigellachie, because we're already out again. We brought in 3 cases this week, and it's all gone. It's all gone.
Fantastic. I'd like to know that it's going to good homes. These are my babies. I adopt them. Should we move on to the Tamdhu next?
Yes, please. That's about what I'm ready for. Tamdhu, pardon me. I was going to do Inchgower, but yes, Tamdhu it is.
Yeah, I think we'll see something fun here. I vacillated as well, but I chose the Tamdhu next for a couple of reasons. Now we're going to the first one was a refill butt, and now we're into a first fill. And if we look at, we're at a Tamdhu 10-year-old. It's another Speyside. Was
it Fino Sherry? That's first fill?
I know, isn't that nuts? Just nuts. 1 second here.
Okay, go for it.
Go for it, Lee.
There we go.
There we go.
Working from home. So what I want to show you, though, and if people have the bottles at home, take a look at the difference in color between the two. We've got refill. It's actually picked up a little color, and you see that haze there. And then we've got the 10-year-old. Another fun note, the difference that a barrel can make, is in that 10 years, we've gone from, with a 3-year difference, we're now at 452 bottles from this cask. So almost a 400 bottle drop in volume in that 3 years. Once the whiskey is evaporated kind of beyond those curves of the barrel and has a wider, flatter surface, the angel share just takes off. That's some science for you there.
Yeah.
And I think on the palate we're going to get a richer texture, but it's not going to be explosively sweet like one can expect from sherry. At a younger age, sherry barrels, because of that wood to whiskey ratio, because of the larger size, sherry barrels actually impart less sweetness than a bourbon barrel or a bourbon hogshead would.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm. I love Tamdhu. I think that their distillery offerings, it's a very pretty bottle that Ian McLeod has been doing. That's the current owners. This was founded in 1897. It actually was shuttered for 20 years, between 27 and 47 during the Depression and World War II. I love this. So an ownership tactic in 1976 was the first time that Tamdhu was released as a single malt. That's quite a history to have before ever releasing a single malt. And unfortunately, they decided that this should be released as the people's single malt. Their pricing strategy was to be the least expensive single malt in the market. Now, you ever go on a date to a restaurant and you open the wine list, and the wine is it's a great wine list. It's all looking good, and the wine you want is actually the cheapest one on the list. But you're on that date.
Yep.
It might be perfect with what you're going to eat, but you don't order the cheapest ever.
No, and it's actually comes right down to, and you know
this.
this from writing wine lists for a living. I mean, you put the wine you really want to sell as the second cheapest wine on the wine list. You just assume whatever you put at the very bottom, you're going to sell some. You're not going to sell much. Whatever you want to be your big mover, it's the second least expensive.
Absolutely. So that pricing strategy for Tamdhu failed famously, and then it went on to kind of go back to its roots, start going back to selling off for blends, and it wasn't released again as a single malt until the current ownership, Ian McLeod, took it on and was able to release some in 2010. Like I said, in that very pretty bottle. I've had a number of different ones from different bottling different age statements. There's always this wonderful theme of candied orange that kind of runs through it. Kyle and I were chatting about this on the deck the other day, and I threw out soap candies.
Yep.
And the young buck there had never heard of them. Maybe some of our
I had not heard of soap candies before.
More mature clientele on the call will know what I'm talking about. There's a little tiny, different colored, red, green, yellow, also called floral candies, kind of a UK thing.
I will say there's actually a little bit of a soapiness to this, even beyond soap candies. There's just a touch of a very clean, like bright ivory soap character to this that I really like.
Yeah, absolutely. And it almost gives it a bit of an edge, and I find it not just on the palate too. It finishes off this great oaky spice, and it washes that through, that floral soapiness to it.
Yeah, it's in an odd way, it reminds me of like the way that my grandparents' bathroom smelled between Old Spice and clean soap and my grandmother's floral perfume and everything. It has a very clean, fresh, spicy floral character all the way through. I'll be very honest, we got to try these on Tuesday and I wasn't massively sold on the Tamdhu. I love the Glenrothes, love the Craigellachie. The Tamdhu was actually the one I was least excited about, maybe because we had the Inchgower before it, but I think the tasting order now is much better because this shows much, much better than it did on Tuesday.
It has that nice oaky spice to it. I love that finish. And Tamdhu is a great age. A 10-year-old Tamdhu is a great age because there's something to compare it to. If you look at the distillery offering, it is dark as night. There's clearly some shenanigans going on there when it comes to the... Do you have a bottle?
I'm just looking to see if I do, and it's rather telling that no, I don't. No, it goes Strathyla into Tamnavalin into Tianinic. So,
boom.
Yep.
There we go. Done. And I actually find that a couple of drops of water on this one in particular do loosen up that soap a little bit. So if it's not a character that you're looking for, what happens is it loosens that up and then pushes the fruit out. So I get more of that kind of candied orange and more what I expect from the sherry influence that we have. Would you be able to get me a dropper of water? Thank you.
Some of us came prepared to work today.
I got the text from Aaron. I'm like, I know. I'm shoveling my dinner in. I cooked dinner for 6, and me being one of the 6, so I wasn't about to miss out on that.
No, that's fair. And I apologize for everybody who's commenting that they're having connection issues. We're actually not seeing it on our side. Everything's all green across the board for us, so I'm genuinely not sure. One of the things that we did invest in a little before Christmas, and because we would have to close down all the till lanes to actually do this, is we bought a new, much higher speed internet router and modem for everything. So that will be happening after Christmas when I can actually afford to, take a Tuesday and have a couple hours without debit and credit machines. So you really can't do that this time of year. So that's something that is coming. That's an investment we've already made. It's just not online yet. So I do apologize if you're having some connection issues. We're not seeing it on our end, so because we're not seeing it on our end, there's not a lot we can do to fix it because we don't see it.
It's like I don't know what you mean. What did you think with the addition of water?
I think you're right. That orange jumps way more into the top of the whiskey. I love just how long and pervasive this is. And it's the limestone soap granite thing that just goes and goes and goes right across the back of my tongue.
Chuck a picture. There's like a up top. Or that, yeah, that'd be perfect. Thank you. Yeah, that is a beauty. And what's the retail on this one?
What are we asking for the Tamdhu? 93.
Under $10 a year. That is fantastic.
That's something
and
I
I
actually
think
want
that's
to
something
touch
we'll
on
see
here.
with a lot of the Hepburns.
Because that's one of those rule of thumb things that I use too, is $10 a year. If it's under $10 a year, I'm feeling pretty good about it. Now, obviously, that gets kind of crazy over about a 15-year these days. You don't find 40-year-old, for 40-year-old whiskeys for $400 anymore. Very rarely find them for double that.
Single malts.
Not single malts, single grains occasionally. But yeah, I do like that rule of thumb. What other little rules of thumb do you use usually, Lee? Like, do you see something on the shelf and you're really interested in it, and then you see it's 40%, you just quietly put it back and just look away? Because I find myself doing that.
When we were talking, one of the things that I find, I don't know if I'm a snob or if I've just developed a leather tongue, but I'm always looking at the alcohol content. I have access to a lot of cask strength whiskey, and I like having that option of being able to add my own water. So if there are options between one or the other, more than likely I'll be looking for a cask strength. And as a measure of quality, you don't put out a cask strength that you're not willing to stand behind, because it's suicide. If it's gasoline, then you've just done your brand damage. But if you're making a cask strength offering, it's going to be good. You're taking that extra step. You're paying more taxes. Nobody wants to do that. But you're paying more excise tax or VAT in the UK, and of course we pay higher taxes on it here when it comes in as an excise. So that always has to be worth it. Nobody's going to hang out on that and make the mistake.
This is a question I actually had a customer present to me on Wednesday, actually, after I saw you. He was coming to pick up the line of Hepburns, and he's a person who buys quite a bit of Scotch, and he'd bought some of the old Hepburns from the last releases, and he actually asked me, did Hepburns used to be lower alcohol? Did it used to be 40 or 43? Because he wasn't remembering 43. That as 46. Yeah, okay, he was right. I remembered that too, so...
Yeah, and it's funny too, because I double checked it once we actually sat down. I'm like, these are 40s. Yeah, right, they're 46. Good. Because they used to be 43. Then they moved that over into Distiller's Art. The company also has the Distiller's Art line, so they decided to move that into that area and kind of punch up the Hepburn. It has their grandfather's name on it after all, so they wanted to give it a little bit more, literally, a little bit more weight, a little bit more gravitas, and have a richer palate to it.
Nice.
Incidentally, I haven't brought in any of the Distiller's Art lately. I've had a couple. I think they're going to phase it out. The whiskeys that I did bring in were good, but with these embarrassment of riches, you can't kiss all the girls. You have to narrow it down a little bit, right? So this is what I was asking my wife to get me. This is a fun little thing that I have for adding water there.
Okay, don't drink out of those. I know, don't do that. It's not on camera. Bloody hell, it's a family-friendly 18-plus program.
Oh boy. Okay, now let's get to the Inchgower that we were talking about.
I'm very much looking forward to
We're both really
this.
excited about this one. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to do it in this order. So we've gone refill sherry, first fill sherry. Now we're at a hogshead. And take a look at the color difference between these two. The Inchgower being on my right, the darker one. And we've got a different barrel. Now we're into the hogshead. And this goes to what I was saying earlier about the size of the barrel, the wood to whiskey ratio, and the contact and what that means. Now we're going to have of course you guys are a little bit ahead of me, pour it on the palate. It's a smaller distillery. They make 3.2 million liters.
And I don't think we see distillery issues over here. I don't think I've ever seen a distillery bottled Inchgower over here, because we get very, very little of the Diageo Flora and Fauna series.
No, they did a 14-year-old a number of years ago. It was very expensive, and they haven't done that since. So the only way you really see them is from independent bottles. I've sold 2 full barrels of Inchgower in the past. But now on the palate, we should be getting just tons of spice, and that is because of that really active American oak. And at a young age, this is an 8-year-old, so more bang for the buck more sweetness on the palate if we're going to compare it to the sherry we just had. I think this has got a sweeter touch, more weight. Not bad. This has got a neat history too. These guys in 1871 were founded to become a contributor to the Bell's Blend. The Bell's Blend actually outages this by 20 years. It was in dire straits in the 30s, and so important. This is in the county of Banffshire. The town of Buckie actually bought the distillery and ran it for 5 years. Just as the townspeople rose up, council got together, got the money together to buy the local distillery to keep it running.
When did it end up in DCL's hands then? Probably a little bit past that then, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. It was actually bought by Bell's, and then Bell's was bought by DCL, and now it's Diageo owned. There's so many changing of hands, but it's not really somebody going in and saying, I'm buying that distillery. It's one large company buying another large conglomerate of companies, and this sort of comes along. Imagine coming into Andrew Hilton one day and finding out you had a new partner.
I got a comment here from Sean about us kind of moving through these briskly. The reason for that is as many people as bought the whole set, or as many people bought just the Tamdhu, or just the Inchgower, or just the Glenrothes, we sold almost as much of the Craigellachie as alone as for the rest, basically combined. So I want to move through the other three just so that people who bought the Craigellachie, which we're doing last, aren't sitting there at home just like crushing Craigellachie and be like, when are we going to talk about the whiskey I bought? So there is a reason I'm kind of slightly accelerating through the first three here. And to that point, I'm actually not even going to do Shameless Promotion Corner until the very end, just so that for those folks who did buy just the Craigellachie, they have it in front of, they have us talking about it as soon as possible. So that's not me telling you to hurry up, Lee, because I do actually want to spend the proper amount of time on this Inchgower because it's a fabulous whiskey. But yeah, Sean is not incorrect, and that is by design. It is because most people bought the Craigellachie. One thing
there's a lot to chat about there for sure.
There is, and one thing I found, that's the Tamdhu. The one thing I was really curious about here, finished from a wine finished refill hogshead. So would this be the case that they took a hogshead that was like ex-bourbon and then they like filled it with wine after the fact and then re-seasoned it? Or is this something that they're doing at the distillery, or is this, you know, one of those new fancy bourbon barrel-aged Cabernets from California that I absolutely can't stand? That they took one of those.
I prefer not to shave my tongue, though. They're gross.
You know, I can drink 55% whiskey.
It is exactly the first thing you said. They actually seasoned this barrel for 4 months with some Bordeaux. They had access to a parcel of Bordeaux that they were able to use to finish some casks, and then that'll get into that'll certainly get into the oak of the hogshead for sure.
So are they buying Bordeaux basically in bulk then? Maybe buying a full barrel of Bordeaux, just probably not desperately expensive Bordeaux, just for the purpose of running some off to refill these barrels and kind of swap it back and forth to do the seasoning?
They don't do full barrel sales anymore. It's too hard to get any sort of accurate read on the levels of alcohol that are being shipped across borders. So it is very much a bulk buy, refill a bourbon hogshead to let it soak in, and then they let that soak in for 3 months. When we use a wine cask that is empty, not cleaned, brought over, and they take it apart and put it back together in the cooperage there. But when it's a wine finish, it is exactly that. They've used finish on the barrel and then taken it down.
How many times will they use that wine over and over? Because I'm not sure I'd want to drink a wine that was just, you know, used to re-season 4 straight bourbon barrels. How many uses do they get out of that wine? Because that wine's going to taste less like wine and a whole lot more like bourbon after a while.
Well, and especially if you're using red wine, part of that is texture, and they want the tannic structure to leach into the wood. So without it being a memo from Hepburn's Choice, but just a conjecture on my part, I don't think they're using it too often, especially after 4 months in the barrel. Gotcha. I think it's probably a one and done. And besides, if we look at this is not screaming red wine.
No, it's not.
There is a touch to it. We'll definitely get to that.
And you know what? I think it might be just suggestion on the fact that I know that it's a red wine, but now I'm starting to pick up some of those tannic red berries and all of that sort of thing that I get usually off a red wine cask. Yeah, this has that going on, but it's not as overt as, say, like a Madeira cast whiskey or something. No, it's...
Those are over the top with sweetness as well, right? So that's got that going for it to help get the flavor profile across. And Spanish oak, where we're looking at American oak here with a really, really tight grain. So it's got to fight its way in there. Yeah, it's just a really kind of plush style. The addition of water, I actually prefer it without. The addition of water did soften some of that spice for me, but it certainly isn't hurting it. But I do prefer it without water.
And Jeremy, yes, well said. We are definitely going to be looking at Apothic Bordeaux with whatever the Langs end up at the end there. And I honestly, in a gun in my head, I'd probably rather drink the Bordeaux that the Langs have than Apothic Red. So, you know.
Somebody brought a bottle to my house a couple of years ago as a joke. Big party, everyone brings something. And what the hell is this? Who brought this? And morbid curiosity took over. I couldn't help myself, and I opened it, and it's every bit as bad as you imagine. It is sugar water with cranberry, mega purple, and oak chips. It is absolutely terrible stuff.
I bought it just because you hate it so much. I had to try it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's ghastly.
Oh, actually, do you want
Look,
to
I show
take
you
the mic,
hate
Aaron, and then
watch.
tell us the story of Aaron's experience with buying Apothic Red? Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah. Well, as all of the viewers know, how Kyle's disdain with Apothic Red, I had to buy a bottle to try it, and ketchup and alcohol is not an understatement.
Ketchup and alcohol, that's disgusting.
Oh, yeah.
So how many independent Inchgowers have you seen through your store?
Well, I was going to comment on that earlier, and I just kind of let you go. I was going to say less than 5 in the 20 years I've been doing this. Maybe, certainly less than 6. Because I can think of... Well, let's just run through bottles. I know I've never had one from Murray McDavid. I know there wasn't one from Cooper's Choice when they were still like doing a lot of things. Still do a little bit. They didn't do a release this year, but still didn't do that. I've probably had at least one other from Lang. And then I'm trying to think, like, what else is there? Carn Moore these days? Gordon MacPhail hasn't done anything desperate. I've definitely had a Gordon MacPhail Inchgower through the store. I know I have. But yeah, it'd be like a Gordon MacPhail and maybe a Lang or two. Like, they're not common.
Not super common. I get one kind of every other year. I did go on a nice little tear where I had a first edition and an old malt cask last year, both in the 20-year range. Prior to that, we saw one. We saw one with Signatory. Signatory had a really good one.
They did, and I do remember that.
That was a cask strength.
Yeah, it was in the black tins.
And
Actually, I might still have the empty bottle up there somewhere.
It was like a 90 or something like that.
It was. It was really stinking good, too. No, the bottle's gone. But yeah, we definitely had one through the store, and we definitely poured it in the store. That was a screaming good whiskey. I don't know how I forgot about Signatory.
So I've sold, as I mentioned, a few barrels of it, and 2 of them were to Willow Park, but full 20-year-old barrels, and just flew through them. Absolutely flew through them. I thought one of them was so good. I thought they had cheated. I thought it wasn't a bourbon barrel. I thought it was like they had stuck it into something with more character. There was just such a crazy marzipan thing going on. But one thing I've liked that has come through every time was this great spicy character that happens in them. That's fantastic. So should we stop teasing?
We should stop teasing. We should move on to the Craigellachie. It's time.
Is it end the filibuster?
Yeah, I think it's officially time. So yeah, this is a whiskey that I need to buy even more of than I already have. I bought 3. I think I need at least 3 or 4 more because, I mean, we're charging, well, when it's at regular price, not tasting price, it's still $95, which, let's be fair, there are a lot of like distillery bottling 11 and 12-year-olds that are over $100 now. I mean, Balvenie Doublewood, which is a fine whiskey in many respects, is still $93 bloody. And it's no Craigellachie 11 right here.
Yeah, and one of the neat things too is we actually have a distillery offerings to base these against now too. Craigellachie in recent years has started pushing out. I think it was 2004 they released a 14-year-old, and then have slowly but surely started releasing more things. There's at least 5 distillery offerings. I think I can see you've got the.
I've got the 13 right behind me, and I got the 17 down here. Yeah. Actually, we very often have the 13
and so
on
it's great
sale,
to have something to compare it to.
Yeah, and I really like the 13
Oh, nice.
for what it's worth.
Nice.
I've always been of mixed mind
So
on the
this,
17, but the 13's amazing. It's not that the 17's bad, it's just you can basically get more than 2 bottles of 13 for every bottle of 17 just because of the way the pricing breaks down, and I actually prefer the 13 to the 17, all things being equal, so it's like, why would I buy the 17? I'd rather just have 2 of the whiskey I like more. But, you know.
Well, there is something to be said for volume. One of the neat things about this, and probably the hallmark of the whiskey, the thing that's going to make this the most different, is that it's discharged from a wine cask. And going back to what we were talking about before with the wine finishing, this is a wine cask. Wine casks are much smaller than a bourbon hogshead. So the yield on this one, even with adding spring water to it, the yield for this one's coming in at 171 bottles. Now, Kyle, you know how much of it I bought.
Yep.
It's like pretty much I bought half of it.
Yep.
And it's like, I tasted it. I said like I would have bought all of it, but they're like, come on, man, you got to save some for us poor sods over here in the UK. We're locked down. And okay, I'll be a kind gentleman. And one of the so a wine cask makes it different, obviously right away. But Craigellachie has almost always been leaning ahead to almost exclusively sherry barrels. So that's kind of another fun differentiation when you're working with an independent bottler that brings their own barrels and fills them with new make spirit, ages them until they're ready. So I wonder the kind of sideways glances they got bringing up this tiny little French oak barrel. That's another note. Not only are we talking about a smaller barrel, we're going to get a more wood to whiskey ratio, so very, very active cask, but it's a different kind of wood. And that's kind of neat because now we're talking about French oak versus American or Spanish oak. And then we're going to have a different grain, more vanilla characters to it. And I get a lot of that floral notes to it as well. Vanilla is more of a hallmark of American, but the floral notes on the French oak really, really come through. I don't think it's tasting as hot as distillery offered Craigellachie does, even though it's higher alcohol. Oh no, they're bottling at 46.
They're bottling at 46 now too. Yes, they are.
That original 14 they came out with was bottled at 40, and there was a riot.
Well, I also think Craigellachie is interesting because it's one of the Diageo antitrust distilleries that they were forced to sell to Bacardi because they got they had to sell that and they had to sell Bombay because basically Diageo had gotten too big and the U.S. government was like, you're basically big enough now that you're violating like antitrust laws, so you need to sell some stuff and you can lose your
laws.
Yeah, you have to
break it up like Standard Oil.
Exactly. Yeah, Diageo actually got big enough they had to sell it was this, Aberfeldy, Macduff, and a couple others to Bacardi just to basically keep their liquor license in the U.S.
Well, a funny thing too is that they the brand was actually created to fulfill a need for more White Horse. White Horse is owned by Diageo now too, so it's just like it all just sort of it's like the snake eating its own tail. There's everything kind of circles back onto Diageo.
Eventually, Diageo will own you, me, everything. That's just the end goal.
It already owns my left foot.
Yep.
There's already a piece of it I licensed out to Diageo a few years back. It's a little walking around money.
That's fair.
I'm not made of stone. Medium-sized distillery. 4.2 million, founded in 1891 by a group of blenders. This was Craigellachie Whiskey Company, was founded by a group of blenders in 91 and didn't release any whiskey from there, didn't produce any whiskey until 98. So waited a long time for proof of concept, even in whiskey years. 7 years is a long time before you can actually have something under your belt to add into that blend. But are you getting some of that red wine texture there?
Oh, I'm most definitely getting the tannic texture, no question. two things I want to get to. I get a question here from Michelle. I'll get to that in a second. I also have my own Diageo story as well, which is one of my favorite ones. I want to be very clear, this was not my current Diageo rep, who is an absolutely amazing woman named Glenda. She does incredible work for us. She makes sure that like our Scotch side is really well taken care of and unpacks everything. She's wonderful. This is a past rep some years ago. I actually came in like on my time off, just evenings, when I just had some part-time staff on, and they basically come in, told my staff that with my permission, they were taking all of the Diageo listings and they were moving them up to top shelf. For all of my spirits walls, the entire store. It's been about, I don't know, 8-9 years ago. And so I actually caught them in the act, and I said, okay, well, thank you for doing that. You actually don't have my permission. I'd like you to leave. And that was why everything, Crown Royal, Smirnoff, Tanqueray, Bailey's, it was all ankle level for about the better part of a decade. Like you came in, where's the Crown Royal? Oh yes, down there, next to the dirt whiskey. And that was the case for years, because I actually caught the Diageo rep doing that. It's now all back to normal because we have a good rep again. But yeah, that was quite the thing. Michelle asks,
Bold,
what's my...
very bold.
Oh, it's my shop. That's the whole point of having an independent shop. You can, lord around like it's your own little fiefdom, because it is your own little fiefdom. Michelle Griffiths asks, what is my opinion on the Dalmore Portwood? I think it's the best in the Dalmore series. And the reason I think that is, it's because it tastes like Glossette, like theater, like movie theater chocolate covered raisins. I get that dried fruit. I get the milk chocolate. I have some issues with Dalmore's pricing. Overall, I think they're very much up towards the nosebleed level of markup on their whiskeys. I think that they're a little bit overcharging. But as the rest of the whiskey industry catches up, I think their pricing is starting to fall a little more in line. I think they just jumped up a little early compared to everyone else. I have no issue with the Scar Cask, although I think it's a lot of money for a no age statement. The Portwood, I think, is actually the star of the line. I find the 12 and the 15 too sweet, but I think with the Portwood Reserve, I think they've backed off the sugar just a touch, and I think they've let that port barrel shine through. More chocolate, more fruit. It's a really, really nice whiskey. It reminds me a great deal of like Auchentoshan and 3 Wood in the sense that it's like sinking down into a big, comfy leather chair, and I really like it for that. Lee, I know it's not one of yours, but
I actually bought a bottle of that.
Did you?
I actually bought a bottle of the Portwood for my dad last year for Christmas. I'm not immune. It's one of those whiskeys that I say has obvious charms, and that Glossette is just a bang-on tasting note. The chocolate character, I can vouch for this, is from the distillate. Having had a number, not a large number, maybe 2, but both of the naked Dalmores that I had, the independently bottled ones, both had a really heavy white chocolate, cocoa, even on the texture of cocoa kind of thing on the palate. And so I felt like the red fruit thing that was coming through was the obvious addition of the port cask for that. Lovely whiskey, really, really good. And as far as pricing goes, I think it is falling right in to where it should be nowadays.
There it is now.
Definitely. I applaud the choices that your customers have made. This Craigellachie is in jeopardy. I was planning on featuring it at a tasting on the 30th.
I don't think that's limited till the 30th.
We'll have to see about that. I've got a Zoom tasting that I'm doing on the 30th with a regular club that I invigilate here in Calgary. And this year, with the way that we've been doing them, I mean, usually, obviously, we would do them in person, but this year I'm able to get them out in little miniature bottles, and some people are able to ship them off, so I'm going to have people from Nova Scotia, Toronto, Winnipeg, zooming in on the tasting with their sons and daughters across I've got guys on Vancouver Island and interior BC as well, so we're really going to cover the whole country with this one tasting on the 30th. I'm really, really looking forward to that.
Well, that sounds amazingly. We're going to quickly do a little bit of housekeeping, talk about our last 2 tastings before Christmas here real fast, and then keep the questions and the comments coming in. Lee and I will get to all of those right after we talk about what we've got coming up, because we got some pretty exciting stuff coming up. I was going to say in particular the beer tasting, but that would be doing a wild disservice to the fact we're doing a bloody champagne tasting in, a week. So no, this is really awesome, but so is the other thing we're doing. So let's talk about our beer tasting that's coming up. So beer tasting that is coming up. It is coming up this Wednesday as always. We will be taking a break on the beer tastings for Christmas week. We will be doing a beer tasting between Christmas and New Year's, but we will not be doing anything on the next 2 Fridays. So obviously, after next Friday, which is our champagne tasting, the Friday after that is Christmas Day, and the Friday after that is New Year's Day. So obviously no tastings those days because I don't want to work those days. I'm proud that maybe 3 people might show up. I'm not doing it. But yes, this is, I think, the most fun cabin tasting we've done so far. We have featured cabin before, but we did a saturation focus when they came out with the Sat Packs in the summer. But how cool is this? So Cabin Super Saturation, this is their core beer. This is their flagship beer. And it has these 3 stripes on it, which is the same 3 stripes that are on our sock sleeve. And those 3 stripes have a meaning. And the meaning is that there are 3 hops in Super Saturation. And those are Mosaic, Simcoe, and Citra hops. So what they did is they took the base Super Saturation recipe, and rather than doing a blend of the 3 hops, they said, okay, we're just going to do 3 different single hop variants, and they're each called single saturation. So you have single saturation made with nothing but Mosaic, same with the Simcoe, same with the Citra, and then we're going to finish with the final finished beer that uses all 3 hops in it. That's going to be the core tasting. Now, for those of you who also have been doing the SAG beer tasting events, we are going to be kind of doing our standard, usual, fun, nonsensical madness business that we always do on Wednesday nights, up for about the first 45 minutes to an hour. And then we're also doing the SAG Craft Beer Wednesday that night. So they are also selling, in addition to this, a 6-pack and an 8-pack case as part of their own events, and we're helping them with that. So that's going to kind of take over in the second hour. So next week, the beer tasting will be slightly abbreviated so that we can kind of get onto the SAG one, because I did say I would do both the same night. Oops. But yeah, this is going to be a really, really fun one. That's going to be something. Wine tasting, our last one before Christmas, and this one I'm very proud of. This is something that, this took a lot of arguing between Devin and I because we had a real conversation. And by conversation I mean argument, and they got a little heated. So this is our annual champagne tasting. And when I say annual, I really do mean annual. Yes, going back to like the late 80s, we've always had sparkling wine or champagne, in fact, almost invariably true champagne, open on Christmas Eve. Not only to have the staff, like for the entire time my dad had the store, we would lock the doors at 5 o'clock on Christmas Eve. We'd order in Chinese food, get champagne open, and just like decompress from an insane December of retail sales. That's been a tradition since forever. But more than that, for the customer side, we always had champagne and sparkling wine open on Christmas Eve. That was something we always did. The other thing that's been going on forever is since 2004, I've done a late December champagne tasting at Mocha Cabana. And that's also not happening this year with COVID, just like us having champagne around on Christmas Eve. So I wanted to still say, this is a tradition that needs to survive. This is something we need to keep doing. So we're going to do a champagne and sparkling wine tasting. Now, where Devin and I came down was, I said, well, I want it to still be 85, which means we can't do a real champagne. I'd like to do 4 wines. And Devin's like, you can't call it a champagne tasting if you're not doing champagne. And he was right. That does sound very much like Devin, doesn't it? Yes, and he was not wrong. So we are doing a true champagne, and the tasting does have to be $95 and do 2 other wines. And if you're really sore about that, please take it up with Devin. Point out that Kyle was right. But regardless, this is the tasting we're doing, and it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to do 3 really interesting regions. We are, of course, going to do true champagne. We're going to do Cava, which is really the most important sparkling wine region outside of Champagne. No, we're not talking about Prosecco. And finally, we are going to do Limoux, which is where the whole sparkling wine story journey starts, because they started doing sparkling wines deliberately about 50, 60 years before the Champagne folks did. So 2 whites and a sparkling rosé. Whole tasting is $95. That's going to be really, really fun. And then Beer tasting, I have not decided what the heck we're going to do between Christmas and New Year's. To be honest, I'm in retail, so my brain has processed everything up to Christmas Eve at 5 o'clock, and I'll figure everything else out after that. But we are going to take a 2-week break on the wine and whiskey events. So that was
At
a lot.
5 o'clock, the monkeys put the coconuts down, and they don't clap them anymore.
Exactly, and we just go home and sleep for 48 hours. Christmas retail's fun.
Man. It sure is. It sure is. You can really run on coffee and pizza crusts for quite some time.
For about 3.5 weeks, yeah. I'm already into coffee and pizza crust land.
Are there any questions about the whiskeys we had this evening, or anything about the Lang boys, what we're up to?
Yeah, keep the questions coming in, actually, please.
Kevin's got one. Right?
Yeah, Kevin actually has a really interesting question. How typical are each of these for each of their respective distilleries?
I have found a real throughput on the Tamdhu that I've tasted in several of the other Tamdhus that I've had before. Inchgower, I've always got a great spice influence there in their bottlings. Glenrothes, this is pretty light stuff comparative to what you're seeing out of the distillery offerings.
And I'm going to actually wildly disagree with you on this Glenrothes, and I've been biting my tongue all night, but I've now had enough whiskey to say, shut up, Lee. Let me tell you how this whiskey's about. I actually think, I don't find this Glenrothes that light. I find it big, I find it punchy, I think it's got some phenolic characters. I think it's got a lot of richness and body for 7 years old. I think, comparatively, the Tamdhu is, quite a bit lighter. I think this Glenrothes is an absolute star, and my issue with the what you call the pineapple bottles of Glenrothes, I think they're just too sweet. This is not sweet. It's
Agreed.
Dry and it's spicy and it's lightly phenolic, and it's going for you, and I love that about it. Every time that you say, oh, it's so light and so ethereal, it's like, no,
I
agree
with you on the sweetness.
It's not sweet.
It is definitely nowhere near as sweet as the Glenrothes distillery bottlings. And to be honest, I've never had one this young. I've had some non-age statement Glenrothes, but we know that they're adding and they're chill filtering, so we're not comparing apples to apples, really. And given what we talked about earlier, that the caramel that is added doesn't actually add the sugar that we're thinking it does, it's all about color. Well, my color eyes are drinking that in, and it's just a sweeter touch.
Yep.
Whereas the Rothes that we've got tonight is just so light and airy, and I love it. But you're saying it's thicker than I think it is, and that's okay. We're allowed to disagree on that.
I just think it's bigger. I think it's actually, when I had these, let me tell you my experience with these. So the very first day that these came in, a couple of customers did buy one each, and each of them poured me a small, tiny sample before they left so I could try it myself. And I had the Inchgower and I had the Craigellachie. I liked the Inchgower and I absolutely loved the Craigellachie, and I ordered more of the Craigellachie, and I also started pumping its tires for the tasting. I actually didn't get to try the Glenrothes or the Tamdhu until Tuesday on your back deck there, and that's when I got to try those. I've really come to respect this little Glenrothes. I like the Tamdhu. It's a little flowery for me. The Inchgower, I think, is no slouch, but I feel like in this lineup, it just gets a little lost because it's a very subtle whiskey. There's a lot going on with it, but just these are big, assertive personalities, and it's the quiet one that likes books and puzzles.
It's the George Harrison of the
Yeah, exactly.
tasting.
It's the George Harrison whiskey, really. I mean, it's not bad in any way. It's just very quiet. And to me, I still think the Craigellachie is the star here, but I've got that Glenrothes right neck and neck with it. I really
nice.
like that.
I like it too. I the Craigellachie, again, I'll go back to some obvious charms, and that's some difference. That wine cask is really throwing a curveball, and I love that. I would say the Inchgower is my favorite, to be honest. I like the spice. I like and I've got a long history of paying my mortgage with barrels of it, so I have a little bit of a soft spot there. But yeah, it's performing exactly. Back to the question, it's performing exactly as the other Inchgowers, even though they're fewer and further between that I've had. The Tamdhu is a little lighter than the expressions that I've had. Definitely lighter than the distillery offering. It does have a classic candied orange, but weight-wise, I found that this particular expression was a little bit lighter than ones I've had, particularly ones I've had from the Lang family. So
I'm
that-
going
hope that
back to the
answers that
Inchgower
question
on
in
your
a roundabout
recommendation
way.
here.
Yeah.
Gonna try the Inchgower again.
Yeah, it's especially when you build on those when you go from the refill sherry to first fill sherry and then curveball with a wine finished bourbon cask. It's just nuts, right?
Marina says she's with Devin on the champagne tasting, and to be honest, I mean, clearly I was also with Devin because that was the way we went down. Devin and I may have some very heated discussions about these tastings, but in the end, A, the tastings are always better because we discuss them, and B, because, yeah, it's better when we debate things because, you know, I had one idea, he had a different idea, and when we debate it, the tasting just ends up better. It's a more well thought out, more well planned event because we actually talked about it. That actually leads something in for me that I actually heard about 3 months ago when an agent was in here selling stuff, and Devin and I, you know, were tasting wine together, as we very often do, at least with an agent we take seriously. And he was shocked that Devin and I were tasting the wine seriously and actually having a debate. He's like, "Oh, this never happens." I was like, "What do you mean this never happens? This is a decision about bringing in wine. How does this never happen? What usually happens?" Like they asked, he's like, "Oh, well, they just asked for a discount, and then like I go away, and that's the tasting." It's like, how is that how this works? That's madness to me.
No, there'd be nothing worse in a wine store than confirmation bias from your secondhand man. Then you would just have one palate for the whole store, and it would be boring. Absolutely boring. So the fact that there is debate, I mean, A, good news, both of you care about it, so that's always nice. And B, you get informed choices around the store. Every Spock needs a Kirk, every Kirk needs a Spock. There has to be some to move everything forward. It's one of the reasons why governments aren't working so well these days.
I'll be honest, when it comes to wine these days, I'm increasingly more Spock and less Kirk with Devin. Devin's just, man, that guy's got a hell of a palate these days.
Was that when you took over the ownership of the store that you started drilling down on some of the minutia details and being a little more Spock-like?
It was when I started doing all of my own books and couldn't be out front all the time and still had to do the whiskey side and just generally the spirit side. I mean, Devin's done a spectacular job doing all of the wine buying for us. I mean, I occasionally do still bring in stuff, and Devin's like, "Why did you bring this in?" Well, let me tell you, friend, why this is here. Because we didn't have a damn Prosecco, and you don't care about Prosecco, and we needed a damn Prosecco. Sometimes it is those. And Nigel really just does our beer department apart from the stuff where I drive to Calgary. So to a certain point, you know, I do the spirits buying, and I notice holes and fill in some odds and ends. But even over the last few months, like, even that side of it where, you know, Devin's moved from buying what he loves to, oh, we're short of Bordeaux in our Bordeaux section, I need to go find a Bordeaux. He's really grown, and it's been incredible to see. He's gone from just being an incredible palate and passionate buyer to being like more an administrator, which that's just such wonderful thing to see, just overall.
A maturity in the role, that's for sure. It's if you ever been to, we'll go back to another restaurant. You go to a restaurant and sit down and go, "Oh, so somebody likes Malbec?"
Yeah, I know. God, I know. It really is when you can sit down, and this is one thing I think that it's very much peeking behind the curtain. When you can sit down in a restaurant and be like, "Oh, I see what you're about. I can see everything about you. You started out in probably an Earl's or a keg because look at the Californian cabs. And then you discovered Californian Chardonnay because you have Rombauer on there, as well as 3 others. And then. Yeah, you can certainly tell.
You know, it's a great hit on wine lists these days is Gruner Veltliner. You're going to get some great aged Gruners on some of the bigger, deeper wine lists out there. There was a real fad about 10 years ago, and it's still there. Fortunately,
it's actually come full circle. Gruner's hot again. I love Gruner.
I do too. It's good stuff.
Although I'll
really
admit,
good
like
stuff.
everything that I like, and I'll say this about it, everything I like that Gruner does, I find Garganega does better. And it's like, that's become like right up there with Riesling for me. This was not supposed to be a wine tasting, mind. We've gone full into tangent land again, so well done us.
So like, what are the almonds? There's almonds in Garganega.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
awesome.
Sean asked a really interesting question. All the Craigellachie he's had before had a really oily, slippery mouthfeel, and this one doesn't. I think that's down to the tannin that it's picking up from the red wine cask, and the tannin is interrupting that slickness by adding a textural component that's making the whiskey feel more grippy. Lee, do you have a different opinion on that?
No, I absolutely agree. It overpowers. There's a texture that will overpower that from the tannic structure, and these are not chill filtered at all. So that oil still is there. We haven't taken any of it out, but it's just being run over by the wine cask and then on the floral notes of it as well. I would agree that there is definitely it's not hotter in alcohol, but it is an oilier style, very Speyside-y, and I think that's been kind of filtered out naturally by the wine cask.
Now, can we talk about the big sexy news coming for 2021 with Hepburn's Choice, or is that still we can't talk about it too much?
No, we can talk about it because, well, I don't. I've been burned before. I'm hoping that the next order that I have coming in February has the slick new packaging that we were talking about before. Sometimes it takes a couple of swings. Right, what we've got in our hands here is the second attempt for Hepburn's Choice packaging, and they've moved in a positive direction. The next setup is just going to blow it away. They've reworked some of their barrel program as well, so we'll see a few more fun finishes on the go. But most importantly, we're going to see something that's really easy to read, so that you know exactly what it is you're buying. It'll be very bold.
That only started when you stepped on the cable. Sorry, go ahead, Lee.
No problem at all. No problem at all. So yeah, we're going to see. They're going to carry that same color scheme that they've got in the stripes and ribbons on the first edition and old malt cask. So purple will be Highland, red will be Speyside, and it's a very, very identifiable kind of packaging for people that kind of shop in those categories. Beautiful Isla stuff coming through, and that should all be here in February.
Beautiful. I'm looking forward to that, and the packaging does look really, really good.
Mm-hmm. You're one of the few people outside of Scotland that's seen it. You, me, and a couple other people in Select Icon. And I say only I say only a couple of other people because the spirits division is completely alone. It's I answer to no one.
You're a rogue operative. I like it.
Absolutely. But yeah, great questions, everyone. That's been some really good, obviously informed palates. I love it when people ask about distillery offerings versus what we do, because I've got two options there. I can say, oh, ours are the best, and those aren't anything. What would I be saying about the base spirit if that was what I did? I like to celebrate what they've got going on. I think Craigellachie's done a great job of creating something from nothing, even though they were out there as independents. They've created a whole new single malt in the last 10, 15 years, which is pretty good. I think they're doing a great job there. I think I'd like to have a conversation, just because I'm looking at it over your shoulder there. I'd love to have a conversation with the people doing the Cragganmore packaging and maybe tune them up a little bit. I think it's terrible.
But it's the Classic 6, the Classic 6 that's been around since 1988. It's how do you improve on a classic? I mean, not counting with Glenrothes, which tastes like nothing.
It's triple distilled. 88, that's what a classic is nowadays. So I'll tell you what, I'm like super classic.
Yeah. No, I will say in terms of distillery editions, though, I can't really comment on Inchgower because I've really never had a distillery edition Inchgower, but I will say that the other three, I think they're all an improvement over the distillery editions. With the understanding that I really, really like the Craigellachie 13, I still like the 11 over it by a hair.
Yeah, I like it a lot too. It is good, and it sounds to me like you'll be taking the lion's share of it. So I'll be taking it off my club tasting for the 30th.
Well, I'm going to take another 3 on Monday, so yeah, that's only 3. You'll be fine.
3 left.
Okay, well then yes, you don't have any left. But that's a terrible tragedy for you. But as I like to say, it's a you problem.
Just to be clear, not a complaint.
Yep, good enough.
There are worse problems for me to have. Did you have the Ben Nevis on the shelf now? That old malt cask?
It's a first edition Ben Nevis 23. The old malt cask.
Sorry, first edition. My apologies. Yeah. Yeah. You got that on the shelf. That is a very special whiskey, and I forgot to get the details down because I want to buy that bottle from you.
You should probably pay me for the 3 sample bottles I delivered earlier, too.
Delivered and then not paid.
Yep.
Slick.
Yep.
You got to watch out for this guy.
You do. Saw you coming
I was nice enough to share those vials with you. No, definitely. We'll get that all on one invoice. And the Bunnahabhain, did that have some traction there as well, the 27-year-old?
I mean, as much traction as like a $400 whiskey on the shelf, ever does on day one. This isn't Calgary, Lee. I mean, those are a bit of a hand sell. Usually people claiming their vicinity point like big gift certificate reward, which is fun. I had 2 people do that today. I had 2 people like cash in their vicinity points for $600 gift certificates today. So yeah, they were really stoked about it. Yeah, and I love that. I actually, I think it was Ryan said, he's like, aren't you worried when people do that? It's like, no, it means they've like bought stuff here and it's like their big day. It's like, yeah, here's free Christmas booze. I love it. I really love it. Yeah. So it's not a bad thing at all. I absolutely love giving those out. But yeah.
They've earned it.
They've absolutely earned it. Yeah. So, yeah, I think we'll, unless we have some last minute questions.
Yep, get them in.
Let's get them in.
Do you want to do ratings at all? Or?
Yeah, I do want to do ratings because, I mean, Lee didn't make these, probably. So, ratings. I am going to give the Inchgower last. I get all of your arguments about it. I know it basically paid for your house, but, because all the money's in repping. I'm going to go... Yeah, I'm going to go Craigellachie and then a very close second, this Glenrothes 7. I really liked this, far more than I thought I would. Then the Tamdhu, and then the Inchgower. I enjoyed the Inchgower. I would happily buy any of the other 3 for my personal collection. Absolutely. The Inchgower was nice. I'm glad it was your favorite, but to me it was the other 3. Craigellachie, Glenrothes, Tamdhu, and then Inchgower. How about you, Lee? What's your ranking there?
I'm Inchgower, Craigellachie, Glenrothes, Tamdhu, and I typically would place the Tamdhu a little bit higher, but working back and forth on that Glenrothes, maybe I was being a little mean because it's only 7 years old, and yeah, that's my ranking.
Just a classy guy.
bully.
And what about you folks at home? We have rankings coming in yet, Aaron?
Kevin
has the ranking. Nice. My phone's doing that fun thing again where I have to reload the comments every time.
You should read Kevin's comment.
Kevin can't feel his face anymore, so that's good. I feel like we've achieved our goals.
It's 7:15.
Yep. So Kevin's is similar to mine. He ended up going with Craigellachie, Glenrothes, Inchgower, and then finishing on the Tamdhu, and that's very, honestly, in certain ways, very similar to both of ours. I mean, I think we've all basically, I think every single one of us has either put the Glenrothes second or third. That's pretty remarkable, and the Craigellachie's either been first or second. The Inchgower's had a heck of a journey, but that's fine. And the Tamdhu's been more or less consistently kind of in the lower half.
It's an embarrassment of riches here. As far as if you're going to come in last, it's okay to come in last against this group. That's for sure.
If I've built the tasting well, then you know what? There's no shame in coming fourth. And then there's there's the collective arts tasting where we had all the things. In which case it was a deep, shameful embarrassment to come last. Oh, if you haven't seen it, Lee, oh my! Pour yourself a couple of glasses of wine and watch the collective arts beer tasting. It's all very straight-laced till we get to beer 4, and everything goes to pieces immediately.
Oh no!
Oh yeah!
No!
Yeah, it's something. No, you should see it. All right, let's see if we have any more comments before we log her off tonight. Sean has 4312, so the Craigellachie, the Inchgower, the Glenrothes, and then the Tamdhu, and yeah, I think we're very much of a similar mind on these. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. I think we'll call it there, Lee. Thank you very much for doing this.
It's my pleasure. I'm honored to be able to get to do 2. Having Andrew come in with me on the first one and then swinging through and closing it out on the second one. Much appreciated. Can't wait to see the faces I'm not seeing tonight because of our format. I was like, who's he talking to? Really looking forward to seeing my friends in Lethbridge again. Good Lord willing, we'll be able to do something. Spring, I think, is probably likely, given pandemic and whatnot. That said, I'm a bit of a rogue element. Maybe I'll come up at the end of February. Who knows? Much love to everybody there. Please give my best to your dad and your lovely wife, and all the staff there that work really, really hard at this time of year. I appreciate everybody's effort there.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate everybody's effort. My pleasure. Good chat. Let's talk business on Monday.
Absolutely, we will.
Which means I got to give you money on Monday.
You know what? Monday's also my Liquor Connect order day, so you can talk me into all kinds of crazy things.
There it is.
Yeah.
There it is. Fantastic. Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate you, and have a good night, everybody in Lethbridge.
Good night, Lee. Yeah, hang around for a bit, Lee. We'll talk to you and kind of debrief after we wrap up the tasting here. And yeah, that was Lee Hansen. He is always our default guest for whiskey tasting. He's with Icon and Select Wine and Spirits. He's been just an absolute star for us on these online tastings. Really appreciate him coming out, and I really appreciate all of you coming out. I mean, the best I can do is discount the whiskeys almost down to cost for these because, let's be fair, the whiskey tastings are supposed to be free. That's their whole thing. That was always the idea behind the fall whiskey tastings, is for them to be free. And the fact that we have to charge for them, that we can't, make it exactly like we've always done, that hurt me because I built those. That was one of the very first things I did in the store, back in 2001, was to build the whiskey tastings into something special. The fact we don't have those has been almost physically painful to me to not have those. So the fact that people still came out and we still were able to have these fun chats and have these good experiences, we're going to keep these going on into the new year. We actually had something really interesting lined up for this month that just because of shipping issues didn't work out. We're going to have a whiskey tasting in January. We will have something spirits related in February. Might it be Grappa? We don't know. But we'll have something. And I wanted to thank each and every one of you for bearing with us through all of this because, the whiskey tastings are supposed to be free. They're the free fall whiskey tastings. They have been forever. And they can't be this year. And thank you all so much for buying in, bearing with us, and just getting through. From the bottom of my heart, thank you all so much for bearing with us. And we'll see you next week for beer and wine. Thank you all so much and have a wonderful night. Cheers.